Welcome back to Chat Shit.
Today we're talking about AFL Supercoach. We're giving you the top tips to help you survive this year in Supercoach. Last year, Sam came top 1,000, and it felt like I think I was part-time assistant coach to him as well. When we had, I think, a 30 to 45 minute chat, whether it was over text, over the phone, or in person, about what picks you should make.
I'm excited Aiden's playing this year.
Now, so what we've decided to do is it's going to be almost like a student versus teacher sort of thing, where I've sort of learnt off the back of Sam how to play this game, sort of, whereas he came top 1,000. Obviously, I haven't played before. So I'm going to be taking attention to the tips he gives now, and we'll be building our teams and updating it in our weekly AFL podcast. So I'm going to throw it over to Sam now, just take us through some tips, and we'll just talk through them.
Okay, and just before we start, the league code is on the screen. Please join our Chat Shit League, and we'll see who wins at the end of the year. All bragging rights.
Yeah, we'll announce the whoever performs the best in each round. We'll announce it on our weekly AFL wrap up, which you'll start to see.
Absolutely. Okay, so tip number 1 for those that have never played Supercoach before is that role is more important than ability for any player. For example, you've got a guy like, let me think of someone, Tom Barras, an incredible defender, not a great Supercoach asset because he doesn't get a whole lot of the ball in his hands. He's locking down a forward, and that doesn't rack up to the stats that are counted on Supercoach.
But what are some of those stats that are counted, the main stats that are going to get you points here?
It's the stuff that you're going to see on the apps: disposals, contested possessions, marks, tackles, goals. And what you'll find as you start to play is you want guys that get a lot of the ball and are either very efficient with the ball or get a lot of hard contested ball, because you get extra points for either of those things. So
it's the smaller stats that count here as well, whereas like I play PL Fantasy, which is just goals and assists, pretty much nothing else.
Yeah. So the guy that got the most points last year, Bontempelli, where you see that he's the perfect combination, where he racks up those stats on the surface, which are like racks up disposals, gets a lot of goals for a midfielder, lots of tackles and clearances, but he's also getting his disposals in a way where he's really hard at it and very efficient with the ball, and those are all of the things that get you good Supercoach scores. So he's got a whole lot more points than anyone else last year.
But is he the sort of guy that you want to start with, the really top tier expensive players?
So that's the thing. So tip number 2 is take advantage of rookies and cheap gems. And so what your team's often going to look like is you sort of have 3 categories of players when you start the year, which are premiums, primos, which are the top guys, most expensive players. You're going to have your mid prices, which are usually a bit more controversial because they don't have as much scope to raise price as maybe your rookies or cheap guys that are 100 or 200k. But if you think that they can score a lot more points than those guys, and they also have some potential to raise significantly in price, then they can be a differential for you from other players.
I was having a scroll through the player list, and I was interested to see that all the new players have the same sort of starting price, the same sort of base, where it's not based on like expected like potential. It's purely based on stats.
For sure.
Yeah, I just found it very interesting because like in other fantasy things, if good players, they're good player with good potential, they usually price them a little bit higher because they're expecting a bit more.
Yep. And I'll add, I didn't have it written down as a tip here, except you want to look at players whose role has potentially changed. As Aiden said, when we talk about cheap gems, when I do talk about cheap gems in this tip, what that could be referring to is someone who didn't have much of a role last year. Maybe they've changed teams, or maybe it's been it looks like in the preseason they'll be getting a lot more midfield time, or they're giving them kick-ins or something like that. And so you know that their stats last year are not going to reflect how they're going to perform this year. And so their price, based on last year's performance, is going to be really good value.
Right, and you're also looking for guys in the season. I remember you took a liking to Samson Ryan last year.
Absolutely.
When the Richmond, it was Toby Nankervis got injured.
Yeah, and he became their number 1 ruck.
And you picked him up straight away, realising he was going to get a lot of points in the ruck.
That's very good memory. I do not remember anything about my team last year. But yeah,
assistant coach, what can I say?
Yeah, he was a really good pickup, and those are the sort of things you want to be looking for throughout the year, getting guys before they maybe start rising in price, based on sort of precursors to what might happen.
Now, I know some of your tips later will come into how you use the bench and everything, but and how important it is. But how do we plan for the weeks when there isn't footy for some teams? So when there's a bye.
Tip number 3. It's almost like you can see the tips, Aiden. Tip number 3, plan for buys. So this is way more relevant this year than any previous year.
Why's that?
Round 0. So you got like every week you've got a couple teams not playing. Do you know that this year?
No.
That's pretty much the case this year. Is every week you have a couple teams not playing, as opposed to that 3-week period.
Oh, okay, so there's a lot more you have to think about then per round, rather than just the 3 rounds of buys.
Yes,
that we
there's.
usually used to.
I believe there's still that 3 rounds of buys. If not, we will cut this bit out.
Well, no, just the 3 rounds of main buys, where it's like 6 and like 6 teams in each one.
I think that 3-week period still exists, where you've got those six teams each having buys, but because of round 0, where there's that extra round, each team's going to have 2 buys this year.
Okay, yeah. No.
So, there's going to be a couple teams having a bye every week, and you want to be making sure that you're not stacked with a bunch of your really high-scoring premium players that are in your starting team that are all not playing 1 week, and then you're screwed. You can't make up a full lineup on the field.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure like Collingwood have a bye in like week 5 or something. So I know there's a lot of talk about if you should pick up Nick Dacos now or take the risk and wait.
Yeah, for sure. And there's also, if Nick Dacos is a risky pickup because he'll get tagged. So when we talk about rollover ability, Nick Dacos...
Oh, and they have Hawthorn, sorry. They have Hawthorn in the first few rounds as well.
Dacos guaranteed to get single digits disposals against Hawthorn.
From the Ice Block, yeah. Finn McGuinness.
The Iceman. Yeah, so that's the thing. So Nick Dacos, obviously one of the best players in the league, but is he a risk because he's going to get tagged so hard this year, inevitably? So that's something to take into consideration. For example, I reckon I won't pick Nick Dacos because you've got premiums a little bit cheaper than him who you know won't be tagged and they're safe to get 20, 25 touches a game. Then, tip number 4, don't waste your bench. If you've never played Supercoach before, you're like, what's a bench? So you have your starting team on the field, and then you have bench players, like a couple in each position and 1 ruckman. And what that entails is that those players that you choose to put on your bench, you still have in your roster, but their points don't count, even if they play. Doesn't matter how many points they get, their points don't count. However, you want to make sure that even if their points don't count, you can still use them as cash cows. You buy cheap players on your bench that are still going to play and go up in value, so that eventually you can sell them for much more than you bought them for, and you end up in a situation where you can have a lot of premiums in your team. In fact, last year was my first year playing, but so I noticed that I could have done a lot better, but the players that end up really, really top of the rankings, they end up having the best players in every position at the end of the year.
So they build up their cash throughout the year with the rookies and the guys that are a bit cheaper just to gain the funds pretty much.
Absolutely. So the point realistically, the points that you're making in the first couple rounds, because of that budget you have in the first couple rounds, are going to be a lot less than the points you're making in the final rounds of the season, where ideally, if you've it's almost like trading in the stock market. If you've traded effectively throughout the year, you've got Nick Dacos as your 4th best defender, and you're absolutely rolling with just big players everywhere, and you are racking up a lot more points. So it's almost worth sacrificing a few points early on to make sure that you're getting guys that you think are going to go up in value.
Well, it's going to be really tough with trades this year, tougher than usual, just because of the buys in different rounds. How are we supposed to navigate that?
Absolutely. So tip number 5 is don't waste trades on a whim, because you do not have unlimited trades and transfers in your team. Trades are, you want to get rid of a guy. It's pretty self-explanatory, but you can get rid of a guy and bring someone else in, but you don't have more than a couple per round throughout the season. So you don't want to get ragey about a guy having a couple bad performances and get rid of him. You got to be a little bit more analytical if you want to get up in the rankings. You got to see it out, and usually almost all of your trades have to do with a guy either being unavailable or becoming really bad value if you get rid of him. If it's just that he's underperforming based on what you expected, or you want someone you think's gonna get slightly more points for the same price, it's not worth it. You need to be using your trades for necessity, really.
But throughout the season last year, did you tend to make more trades towards the back end of the season?
Interestingly, I used quite a few trades early, and that is what left me in a position where I was not able to, where I was actually top 300 with about 5 or 6 rounds left, and then I wasn't able to bring in those players to maximize my team at the end of the year, so I couldn't compete with those coaches that had the best players in every position, and that's where my ranking fell off. So that's something I'm looking to work on this year.
Right, okay, well, we're going to keep you updated with how we're going in Supercoach. Definitely join our league code down below. We're going to be doing a weekly AFL wrap-up, where we're going to be talking the main talking points throughout the week, summarizing the games, going through a new segment we're going to be doing with Sam on AFL power ranking, so how we think the ladder might finish or how the teams are tracking at their current form, so like a current form ladder almost, and definitely going over like a few minutes on our Supercoach each week. Please join our league code down below. Let us know if there are any tips that we missed, anything we should bring up in another video, and we'll see you all in the next one.